Very, very good morning to everybody, and we are very happy to have with us on this particular episode of CJP Dialogues, Ghazala Wahab, author, journalist, foreign policy expert, girl from Agra, woman from Delhi, journalist, Muslim, Indian, and somebody who has been both looking at Islamophobia in all its contexts, even in the most vicious majoritarian context that we are facing in India, and also Islamist tendencies, which is a version of political Islam. And that is why this conversation becomes very, very interesting. Hello, Ghazala. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us.
Hi, thank you so much for asking me. It's a huge privilege.
Ghazala, I actually been very, very intrigued by a lot of your work and very interested in a lot of your work. And I went back to what you wrote a lot of in your book, Born a Muslim, Some Truths About Islam in India, this book in 2021. And of course, the recent article that you penned on In Force, which is, I think, a portal set up by you. And I'm curious, I want to begin with that actual positioning and that navigation, where you make the point about the Darul Ulma fatwa in 2008 and how, though it did, of course, it was very well received because it condemned terrorism, and there was this whole vicious propaganda going around that while all Muslims are not terrorists, why are all terrorists Muslims? When we know that was a complete misconstruct with Ulfa, LTT, the Christian right wing, all of that. But anyway, it was very important in the subcontinental South Asian context. However, you made the very prescient point that which was actually not made by too many people, that particularly when coming out of Darul Uloom, given the fact that it did not explore the context of jihad in all its manifestations, Akbari jihad and Asgari jihad. So we'd just love to for you to illustrate that for our listeners, viewers.
It's very well known, and a lot of Muslims use this argument of two kinds of jihad, and the nobler jihad being the one which one has to wage against one's own instincts and try and be a good human being. Unfortunately, what we have seen worldwide is the misuse of the second kind of jihad, which according to the Quranic verses was very circumstance oriented. It could only be ordered by the leader of the Muslim community, and which in that case, in the time of the Prophet, he was the leader of the Muslim community. So only he could order a jihad. And then it was incumbent on all people, every member of that Islamic state, to participate in that jihad, because the burden of saving the faith and saving their lives should not fall on just a handful of people, and that everybody should be equally committed. So it was everybody was bound. Once a call was given, everybody had to fight. They couldn't make excuses. So that itself means that a call for jihad is incumbent upon everybody. When a call is given, it is incumbent upon everybody living in that territory to join the fight, which doesn't happen. So when an organization, which is not even representative of Muslims, but it's let's say a non-government organization like Al-Qaeda, if they say that, okay, we are going to wage jihad, that call itself is illegal. I mean, they cannot do something like this. So basically, the argument whether this call was legal or not legal has never been addressed. People just say, oh, we condemn terrorism and we condemn Al-Qaeda, we condemn ISIS. And whenever any act of violence happens in any part of the world perpetrated by Muslims, all sensible Muslims, including me and myself, we jump up and say, oh, we condemn it, in the harshest of terms, and this should not be allowed to happen. But the question always remains that how these verses are being misinterpreted is what we need to talk about. This is a very important thing, because a lot of people, Muslims also, do not know that the call itself is illegal. So all these people who are being misled by the call of religion, they need to be told that what you're being forced to do in the name of religion is not even it is not even there in your religion. So you're basically going against your own religion for somebody's political objective.
So it's an illegitimate ask. It's an illegitimate ask.
Absolutely. And I think in this organizations like Darul Uloom, which is like really a intellectually a huge organization, it has had this huge impact on the mindscape of Muslims, not just in India, but as far as even in Egypt. Because Darul Uloom thinking led to Jamaat Islami, and Jamaat Mahdudi had a huge influence on political Islam and Islamic Brotherhood and Muslim Brotherhood and all that. So they have a extra regional influence. So if an organization like this cannot have a discussion on this subject, then who can have?
So you would say that even today, the book came, I mean, you wrote the piece right now when you were after addressing a conference, I think international conference. Do you think even today you think Darul Uloom should address this issue? It's not too late. It can still be done.
It should be done, and I think it should be done repeatedly, not just by Darul Uloom. Darul Uloom can start it, but there are so many Islamic seminaries all over South Asia. They should start. I mean, we are probably not really one of the big victims of Islamic extremism, but
thank
look
God,
at Pakistan. Yeah, thank God for that. But look at Pakistan. I mean, even today, more Muslims are killing Muslims in that country, and all because of this stupid call given by
this
vested
completely
interests.
Perverted call, which is perverting the religion itself.
Yes. So
as I said before, when I read this piece to you, that it's an extremely brave stand you've taken, and I think we need more and more voices like this, which not only take on this, but like you show in your articles and your books repeatedly, the painful navigation that a person like you has to make, who has been brought up as a very, very thinking, feeling Muslim in this country, in a city like Agra, reaped in history and culture, seeped in history and culture, and suddenly you're faced with this very aggressive prejudice and majoritarianism of the Hindutva kind, which must be making it really, really a painful navigation.
It is actually, and it's painful is one part of it. The other part is a sense of betrayal, because when you grow up in a certain environment, you grow up taking certain things for granted. So when I was growing up, I took absence of religion from public sphere as granted. I said, like, we are a modern progressive country, and these things do not happen here. But now increasingly, not only are these things happening, they have become a measure of our love for a country. You see all these people who take out hate rallies, they do this under the national flag. Last month when the series of yatras were being taken out, in North India, you see the Kawad Yatra happens for almost a month and a half. And these guys now walk aggressively, as they've been doing for a long time, but now they do this holding the national flag also. So the moment you are on the road and you see a parade with national flags and men in saffron, you immediately get worried. So the sight of the flag is no longer filling you with pride. It actually fills you with anxiety that where are these guys doing? Are they going to indulge in some violence? Are they going to heckle other pedestrians on the road or stop the vehicles, or what are they going to do? So this is such a sad commentary on our present state of affairs.
No, in fact, I think the Bhagwa Janda that you're talking about, or the Kavariya Janda, and they're all kind of becoming interspersed with each other. I think it has not just a religious motive anymore, it's a political motive. And the idea is to convert India from a republic into a theocratic majoritarian state. And that's what's frightening, to replace our Tiranga. And we know the history of the Tiranga. We know the history of the Quit India movement. We know the contribution of Yusuf Meher Ali Saab and so many people who coined slogans during the freedom struggle. It was freedom struggle for all Indians, Dalit, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Adivasi, upper caste, lower caste, everybody, So, and yet you have this appropriation of the nation. And I think this is what is really, truly frightening. I want to come back to a beautiful passage in your book where you talk about how you kind of experienced your faith, the Muslim faith that you were born into, and which is precious to you even now. And you say there that as kids, we were told that there were 5 fundamentals of Islam. The Kalma, there were total 5 kalmas or pledges which emphasize the oneness of Allah and established Muhammad as his prophet, namaz, prayer, zakat, roza, and hajj. You know that these were the 5 major things.
Yes.
And adherence to these was sufficient for you to get through life as a Muslim, you know. And since namaz and roza look difficult to me and hajj nearly impossible, I checked with my grandfather, says Ghazala, whether I could book my passage to paradise on the basis of kalma, zakat, and being kind to people. And he assured me that this was possible because what really mattered was that what was in one's heart. Being all-knowing and all-seeing, Allah would know an intent. And you say, this in short was my religion. I mean, I couldn't see a better definition of Islam or any other person's faith than that. Would you like to comment?
No, actually, when you were reading it, I remembered, I was taken back to my childhood. And this is how we grew up. And now my nieces and my nephew, this is how they are growing up. Because actually, I have written somewhere also in another part of the book that in popular perception, any kind of moderation is considered a religious laziness, that you actually do not want to make the effort to do the ritual. So you say, oh, I'm a moderate. But I actually, it may have stemmed from laziness to some extent, but I internalized it in such a manner that I sincerely started believing in it. And till date, I believe it in this to such an extent that kalma comes naturally to me. I mean, that's the last thing I say when I go to bed, and it's the first thing I say when I wake up. And I'm constantly using phrases which kind of acknowledge that I have thanked Allah for something which happens. So all of this has become internal part of my upbringing, my lifestyle now, without doing any other things, any other rituals like namaz or roza. And I don't feel myself any less of a Muslim. I find perfectly all right, and I assert my identity as a Muslim. And a lot of people, especially Muslims, say that, but why do you call yourself a Muslim? But I think I feel that I am a Muslim deep within, and I've never identified with any other identity. A lot of Muslims nowadays, including some members in my families, call themselves atheists or agnostics, but I don't identify with any of those identities. I still feel that no, I'm a very serious and reasonably committed Muslim.
Reasonably conscientious, serious Muslim who knows how to navigate her faith in the manner in which she has done and her family has done. You know? Yeah. No, actually, that's a very beautiful. I really like that passage very much, and that was that really particularly coming from a young girl in Agra, because for me, Agra takes me back to Garam Hawa, you know, and that's one of my very, very important points of reference when I'm teaching young kids through our COAJ, our secular constitutional education program, where I believe it's very important to talk about partition and the kind of zakhams and the injuries that partition caused across 3 communities, you know, because I think every community tends to remember it from only one community's point of view, and that has created huge schisms and chasms which are just reinventing themselves in very vicious forms, including the slogans we hear during bouts of violence, which are so painful to hear, particularly for the Muslim community who decided to stay behind as a matter of choice and loyalty to this land, you know. And it's very, very painful when I think of, you know. So tell us about Agra. Growing up there, I mean, Agra for everybody is just a Taj Mahal, but I mean, for me, Agra has always been the Agra of the family that was also bitterly partitioned, you know, which MS Satyu brought to us in Garam Hawa, and Shama Zaidi, of course, in her script, because you see the turmoil that the family went through, you see the painful suicide of the young woman, you know, all of that. But for me, it's the home. And when you describe the courtyard and the jinn the passage of the jinn that needed to go through every night. I kept thinking of the kind of courtyards in the homes in Garmava.
Yeah.
So please tell us a little bit about your growing up years.
There's a lot of parallel between Garmava and my family, because my family was also, or still is, in shoe business, and the protagonist there also has a shoe factory. And the locality where the film was shot, it's called Naibasti. So a substantive part of my family lived in Naibasti. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Naibasti is one of the localities in old part of the city, and mostly inhabited by Muslims. Even today, a lot of the population of Naibasti it comprises of Muslims. So my aunt, my father's real sister, used to live there, and we used to visit her house very often. So the kind of house which you see there, and you see the parapet without the safety railing.
Exactly.
That's exactly her house. Her house used to be like that. All the old houses, the parapets used to be like that, because the logic was that it would help transporting heavy furniture and almirahs to the first floor and the second floor. So a lot of similarities there. But the Agra of the late 1970s and early 1980s was actually, from my perspective, was not communally divided. It was, though I later learned while I was researching for my book that both BHP and RSS had a huge presence in the city, but maybe they were not visible. So I've never heard of these organizations while growing up. I was never aware of a RSS Shaka being held in any part of Agra when I was growing up. And it was a culturally very rich city. Maybe because of the Mughal heritage, so that Mughal hotel, the ITC Mughal hotel, they used to organize a ITC Sangeet Sammelan. So it used to be a 3 or 4 day Sammelan where all the classical artists used to come and perform. So, and because of the privilege that I had, because my birth, my father's position in the city, so we used to get the invitations to these Sammelans. So 1 week would be devoted to the Sammelan there, and listening to Zakir Hussain perform. Or I've even seen Allah Rakha, Ustad Allah Rakha's performance once. And Ravi Shankar, Ustad Vilayat Ali Khan Saab. I mean, it was very common to see this. And
Vilayat Ali Khan Saab's Shagir taught me the sitar for a few years. We were like family friends.
Wow. So that was the exposure we had as kids. And then mushairas were very commonplace. So, and there were, annual calendar events. So there was a Nazir Akbar Abadi Mushaira, there was a Taj Mushaira in the honor of Shah Jahan, the Taj Mahal. So it was a place where everybody got together at a cultural level. Then IPTA was very strong in Agra. IPTA had a huge presence in Agra. Agra University had a department of Russian language. So there was a lot of influx of people close to Soviet Union at that point. So it was a different space, completely different space.
Yeah, and that and the Taj, of course, the Taj Mahal, which is always there in the background somewhere, adding to all of that. Ghazala, when you speak about the mid-80s and late 80s in your book, and it starts with your Agra and then goes on to Delhi as well, when you are studying, and then very painful portions come, because that's what our country has gone through, and it's something that we are given the kind of bombardment by social media, and given also the bombardment by the horrific events that happen all the time. I mean, just 4 days back, 2 Dalit boys are hung upside down in a village in Maharashtra. Then a boy is brutally beaten in Muzaffarnagar for an hour by his teacher because he simply happens to be a Muslim. And then, in my city, Mumbai, this RPF constable, Chetan Singh, shoots down 4 people, 3 of whom are Muslim, because he identifies them as such, using a railway revolver. I mean, these are like such shocking incidents that we are tending to get immune to the levels of violence and the levels of cruelty that we are able to inflict on each other. That the nascent points of prejudice that began, which you describe so well again in your book, in the 80s and 90s, when you speak about the kind of questions people would ask in the class, that you're being a Muslim, do you fast? What do you do? Do you pray? Why do you fast during Ramzan? Do you put meat in your food? And then why don't you bathe every day? Won't Muslims bathe every day? And some, like you say, were downright ridiculous. And how many mothers do you have? So all of these are echoing back and back in the kind of prejudicial comments that are now doing WhatsApp rounds and the Godi media, as we call it. So how was it facing these things? Because you do it in such a level manner in your book. There's no sense of victimhood. It's just something you're confronting with great dignity and with great honesty. And yet you're constantly recounting it. You're not leaving anything out, but you're neither becoming a victim. How did you personally navigate this prejudice, and how do you navigate it today?
I actually never felt as a victim. And a lot of people don't like this, especially Muslims who have had different and more terrible experiences. And I have actually had no experience to speak of compared to what other people have gone
I can
through.
Understand, yeah.
So I've never felt as a victim. This one incident that happened during the Babri movement, Shilanyas, that barring that, I have not.
Yeah, when your uncle and your uncles were taken away, and there was a roughing up both your homes. Homes in both parts of the city were attacked.
Yes,
in Agra.
Yes. So except for that, I have not faced prejudice anywhere. I mean, the question that you are referring to, which I was asked in school, I felt they were being asked from a place of genuine curiosity. I never thought that they were prejudiced at that point. Maybe, as I have written, that maybe I didn't have the ability to process them as driven by prejudice. So that could have been the reason. But even as an adult, when I shifted to Delhi and I was living here on my own also, looking for a rented accommodation was never a problem for me. And all my landladies were Hindus. In one place, I had a problem of not cooking, being forbid to cook fish, but other non-vegetarian was allowed because she had a problem with the smell of fish. But that was the maximum that I have faced. Beyond that, I've never faced anything. But when my cousins came almost 12 years later, they always had to struggle to find accommodation because so I feel that things
India has changed, our cities have changed, Mumbai has changed, Delhi has changed, and that social temper, I think that legitimizing of the hate is what the Rath Yatra did. It was legitimized. It came right into our living rooms, it came into our classrooms. The entire hatred, which was earlier confined to little silos and little maybe shakhas and some pamphleteering, it now became something which was legitimate and something to be proud of. And today it has taken on unbearable heights, unbearable heights.
Actually, today it's indescribable. I often struggle to find the right words to describe the state that we are in today. There is not only justification for all sorts of things, there is pride and among ordinary people. So it's very strange. I mean, I don't know what is the correct vocabulary to describe what we have.
I think there's an impunity that has been legitimization, now an impunity. And what you described about the Kavariya Ratya and the kind of sheer terror you feel and alienation, because it's like, is it my country anymore?
Exactly.
I think I feel the same, because I mean, this is not the India I grew up with, where you had a kind of benign and a very celebratory mode of enjoying festivals. I mean, we all participated in all the festivals, whether it was Ganpati or Moram or in any way. But it was a matter of, participation in Moram, obviously not joy, but it was joy. I think joy during Eid. There was no thing of this feeling of complete othering of each other.
Yes.
So do you feel, therefore, that tackling of that even latent prejudice is important before it spills into and spirals into something more?
Absolutely. I'm convinced that it is more important to tackle the latent prejudice, because a lot of people, and probably the majority, has that problem. if even the most decent human beings who will not act upon their prejudice, but if they're holding it inside them, they always will find some justification for the acts of violence committed by those who are more aggressive. So you have to address this. There is a very nice couplet by Homar Barabanki where he talks about this latent hatred, and he says the first line of the verse is जलते मकानों की रोशनी चेहरों को जगमगा चुकी, अब तो खुदा के वास्ते दिल के दिए जलाइए. अब ना जले कोई मकान, अब ना उठे कहीं धुआं, आग लगी बुझ गई, आग दबी बुझाइए. So we have to actually address this dabi hui aag, and that is what will progressively encourage or provide the breeding ground for violence to grow.
Yes, because I mean, like we said when we started Communalism Combat in 1993, that the riot in the mind festers for months and years before it spills into, violence on the streets. That is what when Javed Anand and I started Combat, that was our mission statement of the magazine, that unless you tackle it at every level, from the living room to this thing, to police trainings, to teacher trainings, to now railway officer trainings, you need, I think we need hate manuals, we need, and even everyday harmony stories, because I think you need the positive reinforcements also all the time, not just the combating stories.
Yes.
You said you were not directly ever affected, fortunately, brutally by any act of violence or any act of prejudice. But today, in everyday life, you're a successful professional, you're a recognized name. Do you face it?
I do not face it, maybe because I lead a very isolated life. I live in a very upscale sort of an area. I work in a magazine which is a very niche in its approach and readership. So I'm saved all of that. Maybe also because I do not look like one. So if I'm walking on the street, nobody really thinks that I am a Muslim. So maybe all of that has insulated me to any kind of prejudice which a lot of other people are facing. So I do not deny anybody else's experiences. I know that, and I personally feel that fear because it is more internal than external. I'm not faced with something, but when I see messages on my housing society WhatsApp group, then I can feel, I mean, they're not targeting me, but they're targeting people who are from the same community as me. So right now they do not regard me as one of them, but all of that does create some sort of
that can change, no? That can change. I mean, that's a frightening reality.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely, and that is what worries me. That this can change if this can happen, in big apartments during the 1993 violence in Mumbai. If it could happen in South Mumbai also, so why can't it happen in these areas? So yes, that is a worry which I have, despite not having faced anything.
Actually, Ghazala, that is one of the things I also wanted to ask, because though you've always engaged with the issue of majoritarian aggressiveness in both your first book and, of course, very notably in your second book, which is The Peacemakers, in which you asked all of us to contribute. You've edited it. It's The Peacemakers, which came out this year, which has got to do with various journalists, commentators, activists who actually intervened during bouts of communal violence or actually documented stories of, very little but very important interventions by normal people to save lives and to, if not save lives, then to repair and damage the kind of hurts that took place later.
Yes.
So you've never shied away from engagement with this very horrific thing we are facing. And that, I think, is something which is very commendable in your work, that you might not have personally experienced it, but you're constantly engaging in it, while not failing to also engage in your other concern, which is the politicization of Islam, which is a religion which is very precious to you.
if I was engaging in this because of my personal experience, then I would have had a motive to do it. I'm
Yeah.
doing this because I actually do not have a personal axe to grind. I'm doing this because I genuinely feel for this issue, and not only for the sake of the Muslims, but for the sake of the country we had envisaged India to be, or the country in which I was growing up believing that such a thing will never happen, that we basically all of us are equal citizens with equal rights. Uh, but now you see, injustice happens in so many ways. It's not just the everyday violence, it is also denial of justice. It's just picking up of Muslim young people randomly on suspicion or as prevention. A lot of Muslims in Kashmir have been picked up only because they were preventing something. They thought something may happen, so as a preventive means, they picked up people, and this happens all the time. So this sort of a nation that we are turning into is not what I believe India was supposed to be, or India can be at all. If we have to pull together as one people, as one country, and if we are to realize this grand vision of being a major power or a powerful nation, or a nation which has influence over other nations, and with this sort of society, we cannot do that. Nobody
Sure.
will take us seriously.
Yeah. And I'll come back to the other concern, the other interest I have in your work, which is very, very important, I think, which is when you talk about the kind of changes and transitions you saw in a faith that was so dear to you, both in your growing up years, in your close family, and also around the world. Because you mentioned in your book later on, in the first book, that how it was 1979, the Saudi Wahhabian trend that started influencing even how Indian and South Asian Islam moved. And you have these lovely lines where you said that even though Islam was envisaged as a classless and casteless religion, it could not overcome the human obsession with social hierarchy and power. And and hence among the tradition-bound Sunni Muslims of the Indian subcontinent, the top three communities like Sayyids, the Sheikhs, and the Pathans. And we are today confronted, like has been over the Pasanda Muslim issue, and the whole question of representation within the Muslim community. So that's one part, that how does that get navigated? And the second thing is, like, when you talk about visible signs, like when you had your father and your uncle arguing about whether a skull cap is necessary to wear or not, and whether that is a symbol of Islam. And you find that uncle is saying no, it's necessary, and your father is saying no, it's not necessary, it's not part of the faith, and that's your father, that's not you. And then, of course, it comes to the whole issue of the hijab and the burqa, which as women and feminists we defend as a matter of right to choice. A woman should be able to wear exactly what she wants. But then how much is a question of choice, and how much of it is actually imposed on a woman? Because that's something that as a feminist bothers us. But given the current atmosphere, you say it in a very gingerly fashion, because you don't want to let the young girl who happens to be wearing a scarf ever be denied education or access in any way. So, this kind of difficult path that we as thinking activists and individuals have to navigate, when you're not taking stark positions, but you're taking nuanced positions.
Yes. Coming to the hijab issue first, I have realized that when we talk about choice, in most cases, it's more of a conditioning. If you grow up in an atmosphere where everybody wears hijab, in your neighborhood everybody wears hijab, then you tend to wear it, because it's no longer a question of whether your religion asked you to do it or whether you want to do it. It's because that is the way you've been brought up. So it's not really the choice. The question of choice doesn't arise there. The other thing is, what is happening today is political assertion. Somehow in the last few years, religion has coerced with political assertion. I don't know how this has happened. And this has happened in both cases, both amongst Hindus as well as Muslims. So now we are using religion to assert our political positions, and Muslims are doing it increasingly. women are doing it through hijab, men are doing it through a particular Muslim identity of a beard, of a particular kind of a beard and the thin mustache, and sometimes they wear a cap also, sometimes they don't. But this sort of a assertion, I feel, for those who are politically empowered, they can do this and get away with it. But if they become role models to those who are still not empowered, then it becomes a problem, because then they're making life difficult for them. As we saw in the case of Karnataka last year, it was because they make the role models those who are in any case already in a powerful position, but they are those who are not in that position, they may increase their own vulnerabilities so much that they just fall off the education highway. And I have been working this out in my mind, what should be the correct approach to address this. I also do not want to say that a Muslim should not assert his or her identity, but at the same time, I'm conscious of the fact that assertion is a luxury not everybody can have. So we have to be mindful of this, and we have to make allowances for those who do not have that luxury, and find space for them to make a distinction between faith and secular, and the mainstream, the mainstream, how they can fit in the mainstream. The other part is the creation of the identity itself, which has been largely a Saudi Arabia project. So again, they were using religion as a political tool to get more and more people, more and more Muslims aligned to their thinking, to assert their power in the Middle East, as opposed to the rising Iran, which was at that point being wooed by the US and the West because of their being very progressive and westernized. So I think they were trying to do that and say that, okay, we are the real representatives of the Muslims. They drew a lot of power from the presence of Makkah and Medina in their country. And but apart from that, if you have more people, basically ultimately power comes from the numbers who are with you. And they thought that they could assert their power like this, push through a very uniform monolith sort of a practice of Islam, and appearance was one of the big factors for that.
Yeah. And the Pasanda Muslims?
Yes, Pasanda Muslims. I actually I find the whole Pasanda movement, the way it is being played out today, to be deeply flawed. The movement is, the aim or the objective of the movement right now is to get reservations, to get the Muslims or a certain group of Muslims being
within the OBC, within the OBC and the Dalit,
they should be recognized as Dalit. A lot of them, Pasmandas, are recognized as OBC, but they are not recognized as Dalits, so they're not getting the reservation benefits of being Dalits. So they want them to be recognized as Dalit. So that is the only agenda as of now. It is not really empowerment of the Dalits, and the movement is being led largely by those who are in the OBC group. And like all caste hierarchies, the one which is on top, and not the top of the hierarchy, but whichever layer of the pyramid you are in, you're always oppressing the one below you. So right now, the group of people who are waging this movement, I was reading somebody's article which said that we should identify Dalits only as Dalits and not by their religion. But that is not correct, because when a Muslim is being lynched or killed, he's not being killed because he's a Dalit Muslim or a Pasmanda Muslim, he's being killed because he's a Muslim. So when in a political situation,
or a Christian Dalit for that matter, Christian Dalit,
or a Christian Dalit, yes. So if you are identified only by your religion and by not by your caste, when a person is attacking you, then how can you suddenly say that, no, I identify with a larger caste? The Hindu Dalits do not recognize Muslims as Dalits, or Hindus or Christians as Dalits. So where is the space here? The only space here is of further exploitation by the powerful. So I think this movement itself is slightly flawed. If it is meant to empower the weakest amongst the Muslim, then the right approach would have been for the powerful within the community to help with education, the scholarships,
Representation, I think. Because I
Yes,
find in
yes,
political parties, even the quote-unquote secular parties, the representation of the Pasanda section among the minorities is hardly there, you know?
yes. That
Yeah.
is also correct, because again, a lot of political representation today is hereditary.
And
It
also
used
through
to
the
be very,
Maulana, no? Also through the
yes.
Maulana and the...
No, but
Yeah,
the Maulanas right now, the current crop mostly are from the OBCs.
yeah.
The current crop is of the uh, big Maulanas, and people who are leading the Tablighi, or the people who go to the Tablighi Jamaat. Most of them are from the Pasmanda community. So actually, that way, in terms of religious representation, they are fairly represented in the community, because the Maulanas who
No,
come
but
to
I'm talking about
kids,
occupation, business,
yes,
economic, social,
no, no,
education, all of that. Yeah,
no,
yeah.
no, that I completely agree with. So that is something which has to be done in a, it has to be work. You have to work towards that, and not just say that our religious identity doesn't matter. We want to be identified only as Dalits, because the Dalits do not identify you as Dalits.
No, and unfortunately, also there's been a huge majoritarian sentiment, Hindutvaizing of the OBC and the Dalit, So there's,
Absolutely.
called demandalization, if you like, of politics, that
Yes.
the Kamandal versus Mandal. So there's
But
also been a lot of majoritarian sentiment, anti-Muslim, anti-Christian sentiment. Christians are too small, so it doesn't matter. But the Muslim thing is slightly, and also the historic way Muslims have been looked at has been particularly vicious. So
yes,
I think that aspect also we need to look at when we look at the communal issue. That earlier we used to say upper privileged caste, but now even the middle castes are pretty. The attitude-wise,
right.
though
Yes,
socio-economic, there's a lot of commonalities, but unfortunately that is the case.
yes.
So Ghazala, it's been a very fascinating conversation. Now, anything else which you feel I've not referred to enough, or something you want to say to our listeners? Because honestly, CJP, that stands for human rights in the courts and beyond, is very privileged to have you with us talking. So anything else you want to say to wrap up this very interesting
thank you
conversation?
so much, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for a very, very insightful chapter. I mean, I was really moved, because the unique part of that was you chronicled people, and not just Muslims, but Hindus who were standing against the tide. And this was something, it was really a learning for me. I had painted the entire community with one broad brush during that
I
violence.
speak better
And
Marathi than Gujarati, but I'm originally from Gujarat and I have deep connections with the state. And though the powers that be would not like to remember that, but I documented this with my own eyes. The problem is,
yes,
the state doesn't want people to come together. Then you're not
that's
going to recognize these acts of complete valor and selflessness. And then people start shrinking into themselves because they feel that they are being ostracized.
yes,
That is the problem. That is the problem.
that absolutely. And I think that is why it was a very, very important part of the book, that this has to be recorded, because the way they are rewriting everything and changing the narrative everywhere, it is very important that these stories are documented.
Even today, not more than 52% vote goes there. It's just that the rest of the vote is fragmented. It is complicated. Unfortunately, the opposition is not able to give a clear narrative against the hate. That is a real sad story. Yeah,
that is the biggest problem, and I hope this changes, at least at the national level.
Yeah, we are all hoping for a less authoritarian state, because, like I keep reminding people, I'm older than you, Ghazala, and I was a child of the emergency, born out of the emergency. I was 15 when the emergency was imposed, and I was 16 and a half when it was lifted. And my father told me that don't even think of your 10th standard exams. It was the first batch that went to, shifted from 11th to 10th. And he said, just make sure you campaign to get the authoritarian party out. And that's what we did. We campaigned the length and breadth of Bombay, then Mumbai now, to ensure that the authoritarian party was out. So if we can fight authoritarianism then I think we need to fight authoritarianism today.
Absolutely, all the time.
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the time. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ghazala, for this very, very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much for asking me.